who's plugged in there. Let's say we have some telephones, some voice over IP telephones. So here's an IP telephone that's plugged in there. We could have a printer plugged in there as well. And maybe we have a server for that department, so we could plug that in as well. One of the challenges of plugging everybody in to the same switch, into the same VLAN, is that we don't have enough separation. For example, maybe we have a critical server, and now Bob is on the same subnet with that server. So if Bob wants to communicate with that server, he's pretty much got a direct shot at it because they both live on that same network. The other challenge is that we may have applications like voice over IP, where a telephone needs to have quality of service or preferential treatment, but at the same time, it's on the same network with everybody else. So to solve that, what we could do is do VLAN management, and we could carve out logical VLANs on this switch and then put devices in different virtual local area networks on the same physical switch. So to do that, it would look something like this. Let's say we take these 4 ports here, and we say those are going to be for voice devices. So things like IP telephones and so forth. And maybe we make that VLAN 10. So we configure these 4 ports for VLAN 10, and any of our voice devices we plug into one of those 4 ports. Maybe we take these 4 ports right here, and we say those are for our servers. And maybe we call that VLAN 20. The actual numbering is pretty arbitrary. It's simply a different number representing it's a different layer 2 broadcast domain. So we have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. And then maybe for our users, we go ahead and grab all of these ports, and we'll call that VLAN 30. And then here's the beautiful thing. For VLAN 10, because it's using voice traffic, it's going to be carrying protocols like SIP and RTP, which are both used for voice over IP. And we can apply for that VLAN, we can apply quality of service. And what the QoS could do, it could say, okay, any traffic coming from this VLAN is going to get preferential treatment as it's forwarded across the network, which is important for a voice over IP type of application. So with these VLANs, we're doing the separation at the switch at layer 2 of the OSI reference model. And then on top of that, each of those separate VLANs would also get at layer 3 a logical IP addressing scheme. So maybe the voice VLAN is 10.1.0.0/24. And the server's VLAN is 10.2.0.0/24. And the user's VLAN is 10.3.0.0/24. Now, one of the biggest benefits of doing this network separation by using VLAN management is not only so we can apply quality of service to the VLANs we need it to apply to, but we've also just forced users. For example, let's say Bob is here in VLAN 30. If Bob wants to get to a server on VLAN 20, which is the 10.2 network, and he's on the 10.3 network, Bob is going to have to go through a default gateway or a router to get there. And because we have to go through a layer 3 device, which could be a router or a firewall, that's connecting VLAN 30 over to VLAN 20, we can use access control lists as security measures to control exactly what traffic is allowed to go between VLAN 30 and VLAN 20. We can base it on IP address or layer 4 information, and that becomes an additional security control that we can now do for things like Bob and other users as they're trying to reach servers that we didn't have before. When Bob and the servers were in the same exact subnet, we had no layer 3 device between them, and as a result, we didn't have the layer 3 controls between the user's VLAN and the server's VLAN. Another example of this, if we have some people who are going to be working on our network temporarily, maybe we attach them to, we create VLAN 40, and maybe give it 10.4.0.0/24. And then using access controls on the routers that link that subnet to all of the other networks, we can specifically control via access control list what traffic is allowed and what traffic is not allowed. Now, one of the questions that might come up is this. Okay, Keith, if we create 4 different subnets, 4 different VLANs that have 4 different IP subnets associated with them, we have to route between them with a layer 3 device, such as a router. Does that mean that I have to have like 4 router interfaces, 1 for each subnet, to go ahead and route between those subnets? The answer is you do need 4 interfaces to route between them, but they do not have to be physical interfaces. For example, on this router interface that goes to the switch, we could use trunking. And on that trunk, we could use a trunking protocol like 802.1q as in quiet. And on this physical interface, we could create 4 sub-interfaces. And each of those sub-interfaces could support an individual VLAN. So one of those sub-interfaces is for VLAN 30. One of those logical sub-interfaces is for VLAN 20. And then we create the access control lists and apply those access control lists to those sub-interfaces to control exactly what traffic is allowed in and out of those interfaces. In the case of a firewall, we have some specific terms for the separation